Claude Giroux says it's not time to hit the panic button just yet. So what is going on in our nation's capital right now? Let's bring in our Sens reporter, Hanna. Claire, just 2 wins in their first 6 games. Half the number of wins they had at this point last year. It's still super early, I get it. But apart from the loss of Tkachuk, why the early setback out of the gate this season for the Sens?
Yeah, and Gino, I think that record is just highlighted given the fact that the Senators made the playoffs for the first time in 7 seasons last year, and that this fan base is really excited to see a step forward. So it seems like they've kind of taken a step back early in the season, and this might be a very cliche answer, but what Travis Green and what the players are saying is that they need to figure out how they can play a full 60-minute effort and not lose focus. You saw that very first game of the season when they played Tampa Bay and they were down 3-1. They found a way to get back in it and win. But since then, they've had the lead in some games and they just have not found an answer. And I think most recently on Saturday when they faced the Islanders, they got out to a 2-0 lead and then they had the lead for the entire game until the last minute and 3 seconds. And then the Islanders won 5-4. And that was the kind of effort that they cannot let slip away. They were disappointed. They were frustrated. But it's those mental lapses that are costing them. And I think we could look at certain nitty-gritty stats like the penalty kill. It's the second worst in the league right now. There's been so many questions about that in the diamond formation. The players, Travis Green, are sick of answering to it, but they say they want to just stick with the process, that they have belief in that room, that things will work out. And one more thing I want to add is in the offseason, there was a lot of questions about the 5-on-5 scoring, which was, I think, second worst in the NHL last year, even though the Senators managed to make the playoffs. I think to some extent that might have almost been a distraction for the players this year, focused on getting that offense going, but then they've kind of taken away some of their emphasis on defense, which was so good last year, or the penalty kill. So I think that they just need to kind of reset their minds and, as Claude Giroux said, don't hit the panic button too early.
But you're not panicking yet. You got to adjust and adapt to what your situation is. Timmy Stutzle on the wing with Drake Batherson and Dylan Cousins. What do you think of that move, Claire? Does this have a good upside?
Yeah, well, the reason they did this is because halfway through that game against the Islanders, Travis Green moves Tim Stutzle to the wing, and then that line scores twice very quickly after. So, just why don't you stick with a good thing? We have not seen Tim Stutzle play on the wing since that COVID season, 2021. Drake Batherson remembers playing on the wing with him a little bit. And I think maybe the reason for this, Tim Stutzle says he might be able to have a more aggressive style of play. Drake Batherson noted that this might leave him with a bit more gas to really take off when he has the puck, play along those sideboards. But Travis Green also noted that with this line now, Tim Stutzle, Dylan Cousins, even Drake Batherson, they can take off into the middle a little bit more. So all 3 players can sort of play all 3 positions, and you can just play in a situation. And for example, defensively, who needs to get back fast into the middle? Well, depending on what happens versus the team, they can make that adjustment on the fly. But a lot of that was caused because of Brady Tkachuk's injury, too, and them just trying to tinker with that top line.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room. In fairness, it says they've only had their captain and last year's leading goal scorer, Brady Tkachuk, in the lineup for 3 games so far, and he's out for at least another 6, maybe 7 weeks after his thumb surgery. Claire, in fairness, is this just too much to expect this group to be able to carry the load while he's out?
Well, they found a way to adapt without Brady last year. He missed 10 games, 2 after the 4 Nations and then 8 later on in the season. Now, the Senators were 5-5 without their captain. But I think this year, being so early in the season and knowing the urgency in the National Hockey League of needing to get out to a strong start, that there is some pressure being placed on other players. And the first game that Brady was out, we saw Michael Amadio move up to that top line alongside Tim Stutzle and Claude Giroux. And then they tinkered with it again. They moved Fabian Zetterlund up to the top line. And then Arthur Kaliev, who's now been sent back down to Belleville, he spent some time on that top line. Now, of course, as we mentioned before, it's Tim Stutzle, Dylan Cousins, Drake Batherson. But I think that there's been this search for, well, who's going to do the scoring? Brady Tkachuk was their leading scorer last year with 29 goals. And I asked Travis Green straight up today, I said, do you think that there's players that are trying to compensate for Brady being out of the lineup? And he said, no, I don't think that's in anyone's mind. But given that they struggled at 5-on-5 scoring last year, I think it's got to be something that the players are wondering, who's gonna take up the slack in that scoring department without their captain in the lineup. Now, of course, he's still being a leader in the behind the scenes. We don't really see that. He was on the bench a little bit at practice yesterday, but after his surgery in New York, he was back here for the Islanders game. So he's still around, and he's obviously being, a voice behind the scenes, but on the ice is where they really need him.
Got to be so frustrating for him to have to sit there and watch this unfold the way it is. All right, let's talk about keeping the puck out of their own net. Goaltending has not been great. Maryland sent down. Allmark was even himself critical of his own game, but he's gradually finding his way back. Where are they in their own net right now?
Yeah, he has been critical about his own game, and I think that throughout even last year when we'd see Allmark have some dips, he always said, okay, mind of a goldfish. He's used that line a lot. He's used it already this season a couple of times. But we did hear him say, you know what? He's not happy with the amount of goals he's let in, but what he is happy about is his process and how he's just reacclimating, if you will, to the NHL season. And I think for goalies, we know it's such a mental position, and I think he's been tinkering with things. Of course, the penalty kill probably isn't good for his confidence. Allmark says right now he's still feeling very confident, but when you mentioned that Levi Merilainen's been sent down to the AHL, that's something I think this team's kind of going to struggle with, because if he doesn't get his confidence back in the AHL, who will be their reliable backup? Because last year they had Anton Forsberg. He was pretty good. Levi Merilainen did step in for that stretch of games where he was fantastic, but General Manager Steve Staios, to me, he's put a lot of stock into Merilainen's performance last year. If he can't perform to that same degree this year, then the Sens could be in some trouble when it comes to goaltending.
Claire, great stuff. Great catching up with you. A chance for the Sens to get this turned around, at least in the short term. 4 of the next 6 games are against teams that did not make the playoffs last season. Claire Hanna with the Sens in our nation's capital.